Hello and welcome to Teach to Learn, the channel in which I teach concepts so you can learn them and I can better understand them. Right now we're going to be doing the use arrow functions to write concise anonymous functions ES6 lesson from the JavaScript algorithms and data structures course from Free Code Camp. Let's dive right in. In JavaScript, we often don't need to name our functions, especially when passing a function as an argument to another function. Instead, we create inline functions. We don't need to name these functions because we do not reuse them anywhere else. To achieve this, we often use the following syntax. So here we have a variable called myFunc declared with the const keyword and assigned a function, which inside contains a block of code with another variable declaration, also using the const keyword. This time, variable myVar has been declared to contain a string with the word value. Then simply, the line of code below that tells our function to return the value contained within our myVar variable. So to return the data within this variable, which is a string of value. And ES6 provides us with the syntactic sugar to not have to write anonymous functions in this way. Instead, you can use arrow function syntax. Before we move on to the arrow function syntax, let's see this code in action to see what it is doing. Very simple. So our code should return when logged into the console a string of value. So myFunc, we can see that that is function myFunc. So let's call that function correctly with the parentheses, and we get our string of value. Then they say here ES6 allows us to not have to write anonymous functions in this way. Instead, we can use arrow function syntax. So what exactly are anonymous functions? Well, anonymous functions are simply functions which are called without using a function identifier. Instead, they are called using the variable identifier, which we did right here. So we used our function, we used our variable identifier, which is simply the name of our variable, and used it to call our function. So that is, in essence, what an anonymous function is. So then they say we can use arrow function syntax to write anonymous functions in a different way, which is the code example provided below. So here we omitted the function keyword and instead used arrow syntax, which accomplishes the same exact thing. If we logged our variable name into the console as a function, so myFunc once again, we will also be returned our string with the word value because we used arrow function syntax, this right here. Then they say when there is no function body and only return value, arrow function syntax allows you to omit the keyword return as well as the brackets surrounding the code. This helps simplify smaller functions into one-line statements. So when our function doesn't have a lot going on except for returning a value, we can omit the keyword return and omit the block of code as well. So instead of writing all of this, we simply type in this line of code right here, and that will return to us the exact same value. So let's look at that in the console and see it in action. So we have our myFunc variable declared with the const keyword, and with the arrow function syntax, this right here, it is set to return a string of value when called upon. So let's log it into the console and we will get the same exact result. So console log myFunc is a function. So there we get function myFunc. Let's call it. And we get our string of value. So this accomplishes the same exact thing as before, only shorter, using the arrow function syntax. So now that that's out of the way, let's move on to our challenge. Reset the code, and our challenge is to rewrite the function assigned to the variable magic, this variable right here, which returns a new date. So it is set to return new date. to use arrow function syntax. We must change this to use arrow function syntax. Also, we also need to make sure nothing is defined using the keyword var. So very simple. Since our variable won't be changing anytime soon, we can go ahead and declare it as a read-only variable using the const keyword. And we can go ahead and remove this and all of this, and instead use arrow function syntax. So open parentheses and close parentheses right away, equal sign, right angle bracket, and then the value which we wish to be returned. So new date. And our function is now done. So when we go in and log this this function, into the console using our variable identifier, which is magic. So let's console log magic as a function. We will be returned our date and time right here. So let's run the test. Our challenge is now done. And that was how to use arrow functions to write concise anonymous functions in JavaScript. Thank you so much for watching. This has been your bearded coding friend, now signing off. This has been teachToLearn. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.